The third speaker this afternoon, again, someone who's had a lot of experience in a range of different roles in Australia, is Tony D'Alessio, who's the President of the Winemakers Federation of Australia. Tony's also had a lot of corporate roles and a lot of experience in research and education as well. And in fact, he's a Vice-Chancellor's Professorial Fellow at the Monash University. So please welcome Tony D'Alessio.
Thank you. Last speaker of the day, behind time. No slides to show. But I've got one redeeming thing. I'm going to talk about wine. And I'm what's between you and that drink at 6 o'clock. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about wine. They're a really tremendous opportunity to grow our wine exports and domestically to continue to meet and beat the import competition. So my purpose today, I think, is to outline those challenges, but then specifically focus, as this is a policy forum, on the things that we think policymakers can and should do to assist this industry to maximise the opportunities that it has in the near future. And as the title suggests, I will cover the Americas more specifically, although I'm really going to talk more generally about our export markets. First, just let me say something about the industry structure that's relevant here. I'm the current president of the Winemakers Federation. I have a background in financial and securities markets, but for the last 10 years I have been involved in the wine industry through family agricultural background, and given that I'm Italian, that probably would indicate the part of Italy my parents came from. The WFA itself is just to talk more clearly about the structure. The Winemakers Federation, the WFA, represents the winemakers, large, medium and small. When you look at the four largest winemakers in Australia account for about 40% of our total market. The next 15 or so, which are the large family companies, medium, large family companies, account for another 40%. And then there's 2,500 other winemakers in Australia. Now that's a very, very long tail, and it's quite important when you're assessing opening and supporting export markets, and I'll come back to that. The other major industry body is the Wine and Grape Growers Association, which represents the grape growers. About 60% of our grape production is produced by grape growers who sell their product to the winemakers. 40%, the other 40% is the winemakers being vertically integrated. Then we have the Australian Grape and Wine Authority, or what we call AGWA. This, unlike the WFA and WGGA, which are industry bodies, is a statutory corporation, and it's made up of the old Wine Australia and the Grape and Wine Research Development Corporation. Now, it's important to mention that because it's responsible for research and it's responsible for overseas marketing, taking over the role of the old Wine Australia. Now, these are the bodies, and to further input on policy within WFA, we've developed a market access group that's headed by Tony Battolini, who's here in Canberra. Now, even though this industry structure has a number of players, and we're working at coming up in August, the leaders of the various associations and groups are meeting to see if we can actually come up with a reorganised one industry group structure, again recognising that the effectiveness of the industry, given its size, really needs to be with it acting as a single voice. But what I say today, I'm fairly confident that what I say today is supported by grape growers and winemakers. Now, that's the sort of structure and what we deal with in developing policy and developing issues for policy consideration. Now, just stepping back, how important is this industry? In terms of size, based on turnover, the industry is about $6 billion. The export component's about $2 billion. It directly employs some 25,000 people and the same number indirectly. Might say in one sense not large, but probably if you put it in the top ASX 100 and you treat it as one company, it's probably a top 50 company. But its importance really lies in regional Australia, and that's well known and clear. When you compare it with other Australian agricultural exports, wine has about 4% of the value of agricultural exports compared to 7% for dairy and 7% I think for wool and 24% for livestock and so on. Stats that probably got better statistics today from others, but essentially to give you a picture. So we're not the largest exporter, we're about 8th, but the importance, but nevertheless for regional Australia, this is an important industry and one with enormous opportunities. Now, why do I say that? Why do I say there are the opportunities? Well, really at the heart of this is we produce a globally competitive product. It has the quality and consistency over successive vintages at all price points, which competes with the best of other global offerings. We're not talking here about motor vehicles or other manufacturing operations where we've lost the edge. Wine remains one of our few manufacturing industries where we do compete. And yes, for you wine romantics, I can assure you that making wine involves a manufacturing process. The industry has demonstrated through innovation that it can meet and beat the trends from other markets. The research from our major institutions in wine, particularly the Australian Wine Research Institute, AWRI and CSIRO, is among the best in the world, and our research and innovation has been increasingly used by our competitors. That we have this competitive product can be seen from the awards that we receive, and more importantly can be seen from the track record that we've achieved in growing the markets. In the last 12 months, for example, ended in March 15, the volume of Australian wine exports increased by 3.6% to the highest it's been since 2011. The value of Australian wine exports increased by 3.9%, which is also very important. And we exported to 123 companies by 1,385 exporters, 35 up from the prior year. This, in global terms, makes us the 5th largest global exporter of wine, behind Spain, Italy, France and Chile in that order. Now, our share of that global export market from the 10 largest exporters is about 7%, and Spain has 23%. And it would be hard to doubt the statement that Australian wine is as good as, if not better, at all price points than Spanish wine. And it's not just bragging for the sake of it. It's an important point, as you know, in terms of global competition, and you've got to have the product, you've got to have it at the price points, and then things will follow from there. If we use the Americas to illustrate our track record, the United States, clearly Australia, as we've heard just recently, but Australia is the 2nd largest exporter by volume with 182 million litres, about an 18% market share, and the 3rd largest exporter by value at $495 million US, 11% share of the market. For Canada, Australia is ranked number 4 in that market. Italy is the major exporter into Canada, and Italy is also the major exporter of wine into the United States. When we go to Mexico, as a contrast, that's a very minor market for Australian wine exports. Last year we exported only 0.2 million litres of wine, valued at 0.7 million. It's a market that we've yet to move into, and indeed, if you follow further south into South America, we do not as yet have any significant position in those markets. The US market, as I said, is our 2nd largest, and Canada the 4th. To complete the picture, the UK is our largest export market, with China and Hong Kong 3rd and 5th. In terms of our priorities in export, North America, US and Canada remain key. Europe and the UK, Northeast Asia, China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Japan and Korea, Southeast Asia, Singapore and Malaysia. Just to use China as an illustration of the success story, from 2008 to 13, Australian exports to China grew 146% in volume terms and 203% in value terms, but from 73 million to 233 million. But the importance is not how quickly that grew, the importance is the size of their market and the demonstration that we can get into that market and we can grow and grow quickly. And importantly, there's no shortage of supply for us to export in these markets. We've got 142,000 hectares under vine. That's been a reduction, which I'll talk about in a moment. But we can dial up additional plantings if we need to. So you might be thinking, well, that's all very well, he's talking about those opportunities, but why did the industry get into difficulty and where is it in the cycle? And in the last few years, the industry has been doing it tough. The industry enjoyed tremendous success from 91 to 2007. It tripled in size from less 400 million litres to 1.2 billion litres and achieved total revenues of something in the order of 5 billion in 2007. And the value of exports in that period grew from 212 million to 3 billion. However, from 2007, market conditions changed, and that has brought with it a painful adjustment. Two principal things that drove that: the global financial crisis hit world markets starting in 2007 and accelerated through to 2008, with a significant fall in Australian wine exports as demand dropped. Export volumes recovered in 2009, but only to fall again after that. From 2004, the Australian dollar rose steadily to almost parity in July 2008. A sharp fall to 62 cents in August 2008 preceded a steady climb to parity in November 2010 and beyond. Now, the rise of the dollar had a significant impact at all price points, and we lost market share to competitor nations for a number of reasons, but among those was that their exchange rate wasn't as bad. Now, that fall in demand and the rise of the Australian dollar created the perfect storm of excess capacity. The domestic market couldn't absorb this excess capacity because demand was flat, and also because, as happens when your dollar rises, your imports increase, and hence you had greater import competition. We had higher levels of international production and subsidy-funded restructuring in Europe that added to the highly competitive and congested export sector. And some countries, such as Chile, had been very active in the development of free trade agreements, giving them first-mover advantages in key markets such as China. So the industry has been doing it tough and it's been going through a painful adjustment. But whether we're at the bottom of the cycle is not really the point. The point is that we can only get through this cycle by doing a number of things, and here the WFA has put out a 7-point plan. But at the top, and the most important part of that, is to grow demand, and you grow demand by growing our exports. That, in our view and the industry view, remains the key for the future of this industry. And we should act now and not delay, as we have a confluence of events that will assist us. Basically, first of those, of course, is the exchange rate is now in our favour, particularly in the US, and with iron ore prices where they are projected to be, we should have a favourable dollar for some time. And we're already starting to see some benefits of this with some increased demand, and as we get better figures as we move into this cycle, I think we will see greater evidence of that improvement. Importantly, we also have, so we have the exchange rate in our favour. We've also got in our favour renewed interest in our product. And the international advanced economies are in different stages of recovery after the GFC, and we're seeing renewed demand, for example, in the US. We're also have the growing market in China complex as that market is. And thirdly, we have new free trade agreements. The FTAs with China, Korea and Japan are important for us. For example, the removal of the 14% tariff on bottled wine with China over time puts us on a level playing field with New Zealand and Chile, while our agreement with Japan has delivered a tariff advantage over our competitors. I think the work that policymakers are doing to secure FTAs is really very much appreciated by the wine industry. Now, other countries, of course, are also seeing the same set of conditions. So, on balance, while conditions are improving, we still have significant competition. So what does the industry need to do? How am I going? Got another 10? Okay, sorry. So let me now come to what does the industry need to do, and what can policymakers do to help us seize the opportunities to grow these export markets? Now, clearly, it's a free enterprise system. The industry players themselves carry the responsibility to take these opportunities. And here, there's no shortage of different plans and approaches that industry players are taking, such as reducing costs by exporting in bulk and bottling and packaging overseas, investing in market development, particularly in the China market. And even smaller players, like our own business, are seeing and taking new export opportunities. Now, these industry players need to continue to search for new capital to invest in new technology and create scale. This is not easy in an industry with low profitability and agricultural risks. Attracting new capital remains a challenge, and no doubt this conference has discussed just how difficult it is to attract new capital into agriculture. So the industry needs to reinvest, needs to do quite a lot in actually taking the competition forward and making the most of these opportunities. Now, where I think there are 5 areas where policymakers here can assist, and we think, and let me go through those. The first is to make AGWA, the Wine Australia Authority, more effective by appointing a permanent board and securing a substantial increase in overseas marketing spend for it. As I said earlier, the industry is not large and has a long tail of producers of wine. Our major competitors, such as Spain, France, Italy and Chile, are sizable and pack a punch. An effective and focused and well-resourced statutory industry body can improve our marketing and getting Australian wine up there for consideration. The rest is then up to our exporters. The reduction in funding of the old Wine Australia and now AGWA has occurred at the very time it needs those funds most. And we have a situation where AGWA came into existence in July 2004, and as yet we do not have, the Minister hasn't appointed a permanent board. But the most important issue here is the additional funds. And just to illustrate the difference, those of you that have gone to trade shows and run wine shows and so on overseas will know this. When you go to these shows, what our members come back is, the Australian presentation was quite small, was in a corner. And this is because it's not surprising when you see the amounts that are allocated by other countries. For example, under the Common Agricultural Policy, the EU in 2012 spent approximately 143 million euros on promoting the wine exports of countries such as France, Italy, Spain, and then another 228 million euros in 2013. Now, in contrast, AGWA's expenditure on marketing activities has been reduced to about $5.6 million per year. Now, you may say, well, why doesn't the industry put that money in and raise industry levies? Extremely difficult given where the industry is going through in restructure. Now, WFA currently has an industry-supported proposal with the government where it's seeking $25 billion over 4 years for AGWA to grow this demand opportunity for our wine, to take advantage of the conditions. Now, we recognise that in the current fiscal environment we need offsets, and I'll come back to those offsets in a moment. So we're seeking 25 million over 4 years to really ramp up at this point, particularly in the United States market where there's huge opportunity in China, back in the UK, and then some of the developing markets to allow AGWA to do that front-end marketing. The second thing I think policymakers might want to think about is that we should put funds behind FTAs when they're completed so that their benefits are realised more quickly and we get into the market to take the opportunities. Now, FTAs are important, and but to make the most of them, we do need additional, I think, marketing support. Part of the 25 million I'm talking about for AGWA is really to make the most of the 3 new FTAs in China, Japan and Korea. My point is that policymakers should look beyond FTAs and develop collective strategies for the FTAs to be successful quickly, in addition to things like the Export Market Development Grant. The third thing we're looking for assistance on is to achieve the offsets for this additional marketing funds that we're seeking. We've recognised the need for those offsets, and we're putting to the government 2 important reform initiatives around the wine equalisation tax rebate structure. Essentially, WET is a domestic tax of 29%, which can be rebated up to $500,000 per producer. The WFA supports the rebate, but considers that it should be brought back to its original intent. Without going into specifics for this presentation, essentially WFA, with the support of the state associations and the grape growers and other regional grape growers association, want that rebate phased out for bulk and unbranded wine, and that the New Zealand claimants of that rebate be on the same level playing field as Australian producers, and we believe that the New Zealand claimants actually have some preferential treatment. In effect, the WFA and the industry is saying to government, you've got, on the one hand, the opportunity over 4 years to save something like 200 million in relation to these changes that we're putting to you, but in return, we're looking at 25 million. Lay down misère, you think? Well, not quite. We are, however, making progress, and the Assistant Treasurer has announced an inquiry into the proposals, and we remain hopeful that they are not pushed out for too long. The fourth thing policymakers could do is to continue to remove tariffs on wine as part of the FTA negotiations and expand the scope of the FTAs. I think these have been important. I won't go through all my notes on their importance, but I think one point to make is, while we welcome the reduction of these tariffs, there are other issues which create impediments, which we've heard about, but such as labelling, compositional issues, certification requirements, analytical and testing, and so on. Now, free trade agreements are normally silent on that. Clearly, the sector believes that the additional real benefits that we should strive for in FTA should be to reduce these technical barriers to trade. It's good to see here that the TPP, for example, has actually gone beyond the traditional FTA and has included a number of these issues in, I'm advised, in an annexure. And you can see the benefits for the wine industry through these FTAs, with the Americas. We've heard about the US tariffs, for example, now being at 0. Significant improvement. With Canada, the practical effect is that we don't have tariffs. Mexico, of course, there is the 20%, but they're, I think, going to be part of the TPP. So the work by policymakers with the FTAs remains important for us. And the fifth thing is, of course, to improve market access by reducing the non-tariff barriers. We support international collaboration with our competitor countries to reduce market access barriers so we can compete for market share in each other's markets on a level playing field. And we've developed a long-term market access strategy, and we're working with APEC, World Wine Trade Group, Codex, you know, the International Organisation for Wine and Vine and so on. The work we're doing on these groups is technical, but its importance lies in reducing compliance and export costs and maintain a level playing field. And a number of these issues do remain still for US, Canada and Mexico, for example. So for the wine industry, you know, working on continuing to eliminate and harmonise these non-tariff barriers remains a key priority for our export markets. So let me conclude. The wine industry has a proven track record as an exporter. The impact of the GFC and the exchange rates have impacted the industry, and the industry has had it tough for the last few years. But the recovery following the GFC in our export markets, together with more favourable exchange rate in the foreseeable future and the new FTAs, really provide the industry with tremendous opportunities. The early signs are that our companies are taking advantage of these recovery signs. A lot more is needed, and as I said, there are 5 things that we're looking at: increased marketing funds for AGWA, adopt policies of supporting FTAs once entered into with specific funding, support the wine industry in seeking offsets for additional marketing funds around the wet rebate, continue to work on the FTAs and other agreements to remove tariffs, particularly for the EU, Taiwan, India and the developing economies in Africa, and support initiatives to harmonise non-tariff barriers to create level playing field and reduce compliance costs. We are, of course, very grateful for the support we receive from have received to date and do receive from policymakers on these issues. The very small team at WFA will be more than happy to go into more detail on these issues, as they are far more technical minded than I am, that I've covered today. So thank you for listening, and I hope you can help us in these 5 areas. Thank you.